Sarah, are you ready? Okay. We'll call the Talent City Council regular meeting January 18th to order. Roll call, please.
Councilor Clark.
Here.
Councilor Bernard. Here. Councilor Breyer. Councilor Stacy. Here. Councilor Byers. Here. Councilor Bernard. Here. Mayor Ayerson.
Here.
Mayor Yuhakwan.
Thank you, Sarah. The second item on the agenda is additions and corrections to agenda. Staff?
Yeah, Mayor, I would love to remove item 5.1, the oath of office of Dave Bastizo, since he took it before the executive session.
Welcome officially. Any other additions or corrections to the agenda, council? All right, seeing none. Item number 3 on the agenda is community announcements. Steph, any community announcements?
I do. I just want to remind council that this Friday we have our Urban Forestry Symposium. It will be speakers from 8 to 4 p.m. You can pop in, pop out, and just a really great way to talk about the importance of our landscape and battling climate change as well as preventing fires. We'd also love to add that we have tomorrow night a town hall to discuss urban renewal. It's just a chance for people to learn what urban renewal is, what the plans are using. So when it comes time to give public comment, folks can have a strong understanding of what the proposal is. And that is tomorrow night, 6 p.m. at the community center.
Any other community announcements? At this time, I'd like to recognize Commissioner Dotterer. Thank you for joining us this evening. Commissioner Dotterer, for those who don't know, is our liaison to town. Thank you for your service to our city. Next item on the agenda is item number 4, speakers heard on non-agenda items. Are there any speaker request forms other than these? No. Okay. For anybody who wants to speak on an agenda item, there are speaker request forms on the table there, and you're welcome to fill one out and go ahead and give it to Lucero, and it will make its way to the mayor's seat. The next item on the agenda is public presentations. There are none. Item 6 is city reports. Staff?
Great, thank you, council. And just so you guys know, I'll be following the agenda packet today. If you want to just look through that, I have the same information on the slides behind you. I forgot to hand them out during the break, so I will go ahead and just pass them around now in case you want a copy of those slides. All right. Well, you guys have my staff report in the agenda packet, but I will hit some highlights. As you all are aware, the Mail Tribune, which is where the city typically posts our notices, has stopped printing both online and in print format. For the time being, we will be publishing our public notice in the Grants Pass Courier, but we'll also be doing our typical notice to our city listservs. We will be noticing to our website as well as to the 5 public bulletin boards around town to get the word out. Also on the slides behind you, as well as in your agenda packet, is just the upcoming meetings related to urban renewal. We know that's a really specific topic for our community, so we want to make it very clear what the chances to be involved are. And then finally, I just wanted to give some updates that have occurred since I last posted this agenda packet for you all, and this is specific to the CREP grant. And the CREP grant is a community energy grant put on by the Oregon Department of Energy. The city has received one of these grants to look at placing solar panels out of the landfill at the Valley View transfer station. And another round has opened up to apply for more grant monies. In that agenda packet, there was 4 different opportunities that the city had been approached with to apply for. A quick update, we talked to the school district. They are going to be applying for the CREP grant on their own for the placement of solar panels in their facilities. We will have a presenter on February 1st to present that project, in case the city would like to endorse them with a letter of support for their application. I'm also talking to Talent Global Estates. They'd love to look at some planning options for how they could interweave solar into their new plan development. As well as working with Dan Orszak with the Oregon Cooperative Solar Program. We are short funding for our 2 projects at the dog park and the community center, and the CREP is a great opportunity to get that gap funding that we need to get those off the ground. Stratford is a part of those conversations as well as one of the solutions for making this happen. And so any questions on the city manager report?
Council Palmer?
Thank you. I have a question. This actually wasn't part of the report, but I noticed driving Valley View that there are some very attractive looking pylons. And I noticed, I wanted to ask, first of all, who's responsible for that, because I thought it was nicely done. And also, are those permanently into the asphalt? Just wanted to get an update on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So those were placed for our public works department. They are the permanent installation. If you guys remember, we did put in temporary little yellow ones. So these white ones are the upgrade to help folks see those bioswales and help them navigate them safely.
Any other questions for the city's manager report? All right. Next item?
Yeah. So item 6.2 is just to give the council an update, community update on the urban renewal activities going on. So the urban renewal did meet last week on January 10th. At that meeting, the urban renewal board approved a new revitalization grant program to help support our businesses in the downtown urban renewal area. That should be launching in the next month or two. The urban renewal is moving forward with a contract with the state to take on ownership of those travel trailers at the Gateway site. We will then lease those trailers to Access, who will be the new program manager. Town Hall, where we're all sitting, is going to have a structural assessment done in February, just so we can make sure the building is sound, if it needs any upgrades. And then just to let you all know, the February meeting has been canceled for urban renewal because it will conflict with the city council special meeting. There's the highlights.
Council Ryder?
Once the lease prepared, does it look like it's on track for the gateway lease to be signed February 1st?
It is on track. We will, the urban renewal board will likely hold a special meeting that very last week of January because of all things bureaucratic. You know, it has to go through a lot of agencies before it can get to signature.
Thank you for your hard work on that, Jordan. We really appreciate it. Any other comments or questions on the staff report? All right. Next item on the agenda is item 7.1. This is the consent calendar. Is there anything on the consent calendar council would like to take out for discussion? Council Phenomena?
Yes, I'd like to pull out item 7.8, which has to do with the ODOT map, and just pulling it out of curiosity.
Okay, so we're going to move 7.8 to new business as a discussion item. Councilor Ryder?
I would like to pull out 7.4 just for a couple questions about the budget analysis summary.
You can go ahead and ask the questions if we're going to still decide on it. That's part of the consent calendar.
Okay.
So you have a question about the consent calendar?
I have a question about item 7.4.
Go for it.
All right. Jordan, can you just give us a little explanation about the discrepancy between the franchise taxes that were budgeted versus our current rate today?
Yes, and this is under the general fund, so let me scroll so I can just show the folks in the room what you're looking at as well. A lot of pages in this agenda packet. There we go.
And then I'm going to have the exact same question about the next time. That's right.
So let me figure out how I can show the audience here. Okay, there we go. So just to make sure council buyers, you're looking right here at this line, franchise taxes. So far we've collected 187, we budgeted 435,000. So we get franchise taxes every quarter. So we are right on track with what we could expect around this time of year.
Okay. And I was just curious about that one and the licenses, permits, and fees as well. And it's my guess that it's the same thing, but there was a pretty big discrepancy there. So.
Yes, absolutely. So license permits and fees, that comes from all of the building permits that we process. I would say we are, if we look back July, August, September, October, we're a little behind what we expected, which is showing that we're slowing down a bit compared to the previous progress that we were making with the building permit. Largely because so many properties have already filed for last year.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the consent calendar? Councilor Palmer?
I just wanted to say the ODOT thing that I pulled out, it was really just to ask some, get a little bit more clarification as well, so it doesn't necessarily have to be
Okay.
business if that's easier, unless no.
Great. So we're going to go ahead and put 7.8 back into the consent calendar.
Sorry.
That's right. And do you have any questions on the consent calendar?
Yes. 7.8, I was wondering if Jordan could pull up that map, that adorable map, and explain, my understanding is it's really just housekeeping from years ago, but it was just kind of fun.
Absolutely. So this membership deed is actually tied to a project that ODOT performed for the city back in 2004. What ODOT did is they realigned Culver Road for us. So if you can look at that map or you can look behind you, this right here for Culver Road used to be, and it was realigned to be right here to be able to better cross-section the Suncrest Road across 99, here is 99. That project also put in the sidewalks and the bike lanes along our Highway 99 section. Really large project, really great got done. So this is just how we can clean up afterwards. It's this section of property used to be owned by ODOT as an ODOT right of way. It is the north entry to town where we planted a bunch of trees and has our sign. So town is just taking ownership of that right of way with this relinquishment document.
Any other questions? All right. Hearing none. I'll entertain a motion. Councilor Perry Miller.
I move to approve the consent calendar. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is item 8. 8.1 is the election of council president. Who's that?
I'll do a quick staff report. So per our city charter, section 18, at the first meeting of each odd number year, the council shall elect a president from its councilors. And just to remind the council, the role of the president is to step in for the mayor when the mayor is absent from the council meeting or unable to function as mayor. And just like the mayor, when the president is acting as mayor, they shall not be entitled to vote on any matter while they're in that role unless there is a that, I'll turn it over to council to determine the president.
All right. So with that, I am then accepting nominations. Councilor Palmer?
I would like to nominate Councilor Anna Byers for the office of council president.
Do you accept the nomination? I do. Are there any other nominations for council president? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
On top of the nomination?
Mhm.
I move to appoint Councilor Anna Byers as our new council president for the next 2 years.
Is there a second? Second. We have a motion and a second to elect Anna Byers as council president for the next 2 years. Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say, Councilor Perry Miller?
I just wanted to thank our current council president, Councilor Ponamara, for her service, and also say that I think we're all very excited for Councilor Byers to step into that role.
Any other comments or? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. With that, I'd also like to thank Councilor Palmer for doing an outstanding job as council president. Your standout was that you were always present, always available for good discussion, and you were always very well studied for all of the items, and I really appreciated serving with you, and I look forward to serving with you, Councilor Byers. The next item on the agenda is item 8.2, discussion of committee, commission, and board liaisons. Go ahead, Councilor, staff report.
To the audience, city council members and mayor in their roles also serve as liaisons for various boards, committees, and commissions. There is a list of those committees, commissions, and boards in your packet in front of you or right behind you. And may have finished one or two, because I know you guys wear a lot of hats in your roles. And so this is a chance for the mayor to do any reassessment as needed.
Thank you. So I would ask the council to postpone this item to the next meeting. I have some discussion that I want to have with staff about some of the commissions and committees that are currently not active. And then also, I still have some communications coming in from council regarding current appointments. So this is not on a time frame. It's not in the charter to do this in the first meeting, so we have plenty of time. Everybody here, there's no one new here, so we can just continue to act in the way that we have until we get this settled. When there's not any turnover, we've taken our time in the past, and sometimes it's gone on for a while, so we're in good shape. So I would look for a postponement.
Do you need a motion?
I think so, it's on the agenda.
I move to postpone item 8.2 to a later meeting.
Second.
Thank you for the flexibility of that, appreciate it. So I have a motion to postpone item 8.2 to a later meeting and a second. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you, everybody. Item 8.3 is consideration of depot building lease agreement with Sweet Beat Station. Staff report?
Absolutely, and I do want to share that before you all tonight is actually going to be a different lease term from what's before you in the packet. Recent conversations with Sweet Beat, they have requested to just go in a different direction as they've relooked at what they want to do and what they feel like they can handle. So I'll give you a fresh staff report on this lease.
Can you repeat that? I didn't catch that last thing you just said.
Yes, so Sweet Beat, we are looking at different lease terms, more similar to what they currently have carried rather than what's proposed in the packet. So Sweet Beat Sweet Beat Station, as you know, is a cornerstone for the depot building. Their lease ends at the end of January, so they're looking to renew their lease to continue operating at the depot building. And so with this new lease, what we're looking for is for their continued use of the downstairs suites, suites A and B. They're asking for a 5-year term because they would like to do some major investments into the building to help improve it for use as a restaurant. The term of that lease is going to be at market rate rent as it currently stands, is $1.10 per square foot for a restaurant space. And then every year there will be an increase up to 4.5% depending on CPI. They will also ask for first right of refusal, which that means that if the city decides to sell the building and we get an offer that we'd like to consider, Sweet Beat has the opportunity to make that same offer to us to purchase the building themselves. And then the last piece of item they requested, so that building is a shared utility building, meaning the upstairs uses the same utilities as the downstairs. So we are looking at recalculating what that utility difference should be between the restaurants downstairs and the office space upstairs using historical billing data. So we will look at that data ending in December to recalculate what that percentage split should be between those two leases. So what I'm looking for tonight in council is just approval for us to renew the lease with Sweet Beat. Some small details may change, but the substantial parts of it will remain the same.
Any questions or comments? Councilman Honor?
So was one of the changes that they would no longer be leasing the upstairs and subleasing it?
Correct. They would prefer not to have that administration duty.
Very good.
I make a motion.
Oh, okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, Council Byers.
Right. I move to approve the lease agreement with Sweet Beat Station for use of the depot building.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the lease agreement for the Sweet Beat for the use of the depot building. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 8.4 is discussion of draft executive order 2023-01 addressing temporary suspension of selected ordinance provisions.
So back in February of 2021, interim city manager Jamie McLeod-Skinner issued an executive order 2021-03. And this executive order was in response to the Alameda fire create a process and allow for temporary emergency accommodations to be established to help house fire survivors. In that executive order, there included a process for applying for a permit, and it set all the regulations for how temporary accommodations could be set up on a property. This executive order expires March 10th, 2023. We still have active temporary emergency accommodation housing here in town that is expected to go on past March 10th, 2023. That includes the Gateway Transitional Housing Program, and there are 7 properties that have received a TPA permit since that executive order was issued. So what I'm looking to do as city manager is to reissue a new executive order that would extend that temporary emergency accommodation and would also outline our other current policies that we have in place to support rebuilding after the Almeda fire. But I want to highlight the differences of the draft order in front of you all compared to what was issued back in 2021. So the executive order that I am considering issuing limits temporary emergency accommodations to recreational vehicles and tiny homes. The previous executive order included manufactured homes, modular units, yurts, cabins, and other structures. What we found is A, we have not had any requests for those structures to be placed under temporary emergency accommodations, and B, those structures are really much more permanent structures. And when this executive order ends, we will have to stop the continued use of these temporary emergency accommodations. So by limiting it to the RVs and the tiny homes, it makes it much easier for those uses to be removed from properties when this executive order no longer stands. This executive order also defines the suspension of Town Municipal Code 3.40, the Affordable Housing Construction Excise Tax, where we're currently not placing on rebuilds of like-for-like properties. Same thing with our Town Municipal Code, section 18.195.050F, which is destruction of non-conforming use. It details that we are suspending the section of our code to allow for legally pre-existing structures to be rebuilt as legally pre-existing structures. This will be an agenda item we'll talk more about later in the agenda. The other major change in this executive order is I'm tying it to when the state of emergency is declared over. I have the power to issue this executive order because of the state of emergency, and so it will naturally sunset the time that's declared over, or by city council action, or by a new executive order issued by the city manager. So I'm here to receive any feedback, any comments or thoughts. My goal is to have this executive order issued after our first meeting in February, just so that all those folks who are living under the temporary emergency accommodation do know that they still have time to remain in their temporary accommodations.
Any questions? Councilmember Miller?
Thank you. Jordan, you said that 7 other properties have requested the TPA. Do you mean 7 properties currently have it requested, or in total throughout the executive order was it 7?
In total, 7 applied for and received a permit. I will say we haven't followed up yet, but we're assuming the majority of those have rebuilt their homes, because the majority were folks that were living on RVs on their property while they were waiting to rebuild.
Councilmember Ryder?
So my biggest concern with this would be those living in the gateway. And so is there, so with this last bullet point, I don't know, was there any conversation or thought around their individual situation, like basing it on people rather than a date that everyone has to leave by?
Yeah, so that's really why I've changed it being tied to when the state of emergency is declared over. Recognizing that the decision of when that declaration can be over could be based on when transitional housing is no longer needed. I am working closely with Access to better understand what their expectations of continued need for use for that space is, since they are the main coordinator for helping people find permanent housing. But they have not been able to give much information yet.
Yeah, it seems like it's just since it's in a transition period, it's hard to know what their situations are at this point.
Okay. Councilmember Banana?
Thank you. As far as, I share Councilor Gregor's concern about the gateway. I think we had a conversation, my understanding, what I thought was, is the council could actually make, decisions around what to allow, at the gateway, independent of the executive order. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the way the Gateway traditional housing site has been set up so far is under this TPA. I think that we could look at some other options. If we wanted to look at, and I, would want to reserve the right to double check these options with our development director and city attorney. But for example, we could change the zone of the Gateway site to allow recreational vehicles, potentially look at a conditional use permit, or look at other possibilities, or having it be separate from the state of emergency.
Any other comments or questions?
Well, I guess just to follow up on that, would that need to change, would that need to be put into this language then, that there was other options possible?
That would not. I will say, if we do that route, we're going to establish that route prior to lifting the emergency order, to make that a smooth transition and not have to change anything in the Gateway site. Anybody else? All right.
One second while I go back to my agenda. All right, if there's no other questions or comments, we'll go ahead and move on to the next agenda item. The next item is item 9.1, discussion of rebuild policy. Staff report, Councilor Plummer.
Yeah, just to have the discussion of whether we should recuse or not, right, for this?
Yeah, I'm planning to.
Okay,
Yeah.
but it's now the time. for
Yes.
us to make a statement. So, yeah, I'm actually not going to recuse. I've already, I do have a property in the burn zone, but I've already received my permits. So none of this would affect me or my property moving forward, but I just wanted folks to know that.
I am going to recuse myself. I have a property in the burn scar and have yet to be in a position to rebuild. So I'm going to join my fellow residents in the audience and hand the gavel over to Council President Byers. You're in the hot seat on day one.
I totally forgot about that.
All right. We're ready for our
All right, beautiful. So I'll quickly do some background, and I'll go through some framework that we've been as staff using to look at this specific topic item. And then we'd love to open it up. Just to remind council, what we're looking for tonight is just a discussion about policy options, with hopefully some direction from you all tonight, so that we could further do some more in-depth research to come back with some potential code language or ordinance language for us to start discussing. So as a reminder, our code states that if the structure is destroyed in a calamity, whatever is built in its place must conform to current zoning regulations. In the wake of the Alameda fire, the city did decide to suspend this section of the code so that we could allow legally pre-existing single-family detached homes to rebuild as single-family detached homes, even though they were in a zoning that no longer allowed single-family detached homes. This suspension of code is tied to the state of emergency. When the state of emergency ends by mayoral proclamation, this code suspension will end as well. You all, as City Council, has expressed your interest in potentially changing that section of our code to better meet the needs of property owners recovering from the Alameda fire, as well as any property owners in the future facing natural disasters of a similar scope. Because once again, this agenda item is really an opportunity to discuss the different policy options we're looking at and hopefully provide some direction on if there's a specific one the council is interested in pursuing. So I'm going to walk through kind of the policy options that we have been broadly looking at as staff. And these are high-level policy options. And our hope is for council to provide some consensus on which direction we want us to look more deeply into. So option number one is really what we're doing now, which is we're tying it to the state of emergency to allow the rebuild for what we're calling the like for like. But it's really allowing legal pre-existing non-conforming uses to be rebuilt while the state of emergency is active. Really, I consider this the shortest term policy, with the idea being that the emergency declaration will last for a longer period of time and it gives other options. Option number two is to allow for a defined period for legal pre-existing non-conforming uses to be rebuilt. For example, this is what Jackson County does. They have a 4-year period where non-conforming can be rebuilt and continue as non-conforming. And then option number three is to allow the rebuilding, like for like, the rebuilding of those non-conforming uses to be done indefinitely. So really at any time, whether it's 1 year from disaster or 20 years from disaster. I just want to make sure you all have any questions about these different policy options. I want to make sure they're clear before we dive into any analysis.
Councilor Panama.
I'm wondering about the 4-year period for option 2, and you said that came from Jackson County. You probably didn't have time, but is there a sense of other lengths of time either in our area or that's typical?
Yeah, and I'm going to hand that one over to our attorney, Dave Bowman, who's been doing the policy research on this.
The short answer is it's all over the map. Hillsborough, for example, has an indefinite period, but the landowner has to prove that it was involuntary, the destruction of the structure. Phoenix is a little bit muddy, but Phoenix has a 1-year period to allow the reconstruction. And I thought I had another. I think that's those are the only ones I've researched so far. So it really is kind of a policy decision that the council will need to make. But as we get time to look in this further, I can give you some more examples.
Thank you.
Councilor Byron. Thank you. I had a question about that 4 years or whatever time period. Is that from the disaster or is that just from, when does that amount of time start?
Although I don't have Dave correct me, because we'll see that I'm learning my lessons in all of this. In the county, it's really deciding for any non-conforming dwelling. Once the non-conforming use stops being used, they have a 4-year period to restart the non-conforming use. So in case of a disaster, it'd be 4 years after the disaster hit, in the county interpretation, right? And how I would interpret it, I should say. If option 2 is really the focus of what a council would like to look into or take that direction, what we do as staff is we look at more examples of what other jurisdictions, as well as look at kind of some rebuild policies, for example, typical insurance periods for rebuilding, et cetera, to help make an informed decision around what time length is appropriate for our city.
Just to clarify, that 4-year period is, in the county, is referring to single-family dwelling. And it isn't dependent on a disaster having happened or even a local fire having happened. It's just if you stop the non-conforming use for only 3.5 years, and then started again, you'd still be an allowable non-conforming use. But if you went to over 4 years, then you'd have a problem. So there are lots of sort of ways that these terms get written and take different sort of parameters into account.
Just as a follow-up, thank you, Dave and Jordan. I'd be interested, I know you just are researching this now, I'd be interested to see if Ashland and Medford have a policy that's similar. Just out of curiosity and to know if they have that even.
As a follow-up to that, I would be curious to see if there are any differences between areas that are zoned for commercial use versus residential use and the non-conforming buildings that occur in those spaces.
Any other questions? Councilor Plum.
Yeah, so in Jackson County, you said it's tied to non-conforming use, so it's more generic than what we're imagining here. But I think what we're talking about, our code is more specific, it's, construction, right? So I'm just wondering, just to better understand, if you could just illustrate with an example of a non-conforming use that you stopped doing for 3.5 years, and then, because I think an illustration would just help.
Well, let's choose the accounting business office in your home. And if you, let's say you establish that, and then the zone change came in and said, you can't do that in this zone. They would be able to continue doing that as a non-conforming use, and in fact, they'd be grandfathered in. But if it's stopped for 4.5 years, then they couldn't continue doing that. They might come back to the city and ask for a conditional use permit to allow them, but they wouldn't automatically continue to do
So it's
that.
kind of the grandfather clause, grace period, if
Exactly.
you will. Okay, thanks, that helps.
Any other questions?
Go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, and I also just want to make a clarification, and I want to thank our development director for helping with this clarification. There's a difference between non-conforming use and a non-conforming structure. And Chris, I want to invite you, feel free to interrupt me at any time with the correct terminology as I use them. You're fine. No, we're all journeying on this journey together. So when looking at these policies, our recommendation is to really look at these different policy options through 2 different lenses. The first lens is looking at it from a goal standpoint of how well does this policy meet our goals. When I say goals, I mean our goals really specific to a rebuild. We have a lot more goals rather than what's up here on the board. For example, the goal of having increased fire resiliency and everything that we build, etc. This is boiled down to just those goals that are really impacted by what can be rebuilt. And so we've identified, that the main goals that we have for rebuilding is to restore the burn scar. We want to see the properties rebuilt and folks coming back to live and work in the area. A second goal we have is to increase density. A lot of our land use code that is in place is to encourage density, and we recognize that we need to have more housing units, and we want to increase the amount of commercial going on. And the third goal in all of this is to always support the survivors. How can we remove the bureaucratic and financial burdens so we can help people recover homes that they lost? These goals, in times are contrary to each other. For example, the goal of increasing density while at the same time restoring our burn scar could be working in opposition. So when we analyze these policies through these different goal viewpoints, what we're really doing is weighing them against each other. How will they impact, and where do we want to fall? Another viewpoint for looking at these different policies to help choose between them is how are these policies going to impact different people? And I went ahead and list some different scenarios of folks that we know are experiencing who are not rebuilt yet post the Alameda fire, and various reasons why. There are a lot more perspectives that are not represented in this list. For example, there could be an owner who wants to build a multifamily home on their property in the zone that allows. I left them off the list because they will be able to build that multifamily in most of the policy options that we're looking at. this missing that we've recently received a lot of community letters about is the neighbor perspective. The perspective of, hi, I've rebuilt my home, there's these empty lots that might come back higher density, how do I keep the character of my neighborhood? This policy analysis does not incorporate that perspective. We're looking mostly and only from the property owner themselves and what they would like to do with their lot. So I just want to make that kind of clear here. And so what I'm going to do now, actually, let me go back one slide before we hop to the agenda packet. So the different perspectives that we came up with that are really going to experience these policies different are the one on the slide behind you or in your package agenda packet. Those are the owners who want to rebuild a single family home, and they're in a zoning that no longer allows single family homes. There's an owner who is restricted in what they can build due to CC&Rs. There are owners who are restricted due to the lot size, not being big enough to support multifamily housing. There might be owners who are unable to afford to build or to rebuild at this point, whether it be single family or multifamily. And then there are the owners who would like to sell their property. And we're assuming rational economics here that if someone wants to sell their property, they want to sell it at the highest price possible. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch here to the agenda packet, page 60, to just show some charts. Let's see if I can get you guys to see it in the audience. Okay, so what this chart is attempting to do is compare these policies from our goal lens. So how well does option 1 help restore our burden scar, help increase density, help support survivors as compared to the other policy options? For example, when you look at restoring the burden scar, option 1, which is allow legal pre-existing non-conforming structures, pardon my misuse there, to be rebuilt only during the state of emergency, so that's within a very short period of time. That really limits the likelihood of us restoring the whole burden scar, because it places limitations on what can be built on those properties. But when you compare that to option 3, which will allow a single-family home to be rebuilt at any time, that's the highest likelihood that all of the properties will be restored, because single-family homes is one of the most popular choice options to build. Does it make sense how this table kind of flows and works? Okay, perfect. And then the second table that is in your agenda packet is trying to look through the perspectives of those different owners that were listed. Under which policy options, what would their experience kind of be? What would they be able to do? And that's really what this chart tries to illustrate. And so what I'd love to do is just turn over to council for any questions to make sure you understand the two charts that are in the agenda packet. And then both Kristen, Dave, and myself are here to help answer any questions as to the thoughts, scenarios, or ideas that come up as well.
Councilor Pennell.
Thank you. So if I just summarize to make sure I'm grasping this, the various options, they're all allowing folks who lost a single family home to rebuild what they had before, even if the current zoning says, no, you really have to build a duplex. It's just the difference being is kind of the length of the grace period. Whether the grace period is what we perceive will probably be a fairly short number of years, but it's dependent on the document, emergency order, versus a set number of years versus indefinitely. So we're just kind of, we're deciding where that line is. Is that, does that make, did I grasp it? Well, but, okay, thanks. And the thing that I wonder is anytime you set a limit and say, here's your grace period, you're trying to do something that'll work for most people. And then I'm always thinking, well, maybe there's somebody who has this really difficult circumstances. So what would help me in thinking about this is there a mechanism that if we decide let's say we decided 5 years or something like that. And then somebody came forward and said, that doesn't work for me, and here's why. Is there a mechanism for that exception? That's my question.
Yeah, and I'll move those over to Kristen to talk about our variance. And then when people can use a variance, it's appropriate, what's the bar they have to reach to be able to get that exception? Or a CUP, either one.
So, as far as the variance would be, there are criteria that you have to meet in order to achieve a variance, and one is to show that you have been, that you're not able to do what others in your neighborhood have done and benefit financially from that. You have to show that you have unusual circumstances or a unique piece of property that will not allow you to, for instance, if it's zoned for multifamily, you couldn't build a multifamily dwelling residence on that property. So there's, and I think there's one other one, but you would have to show all of that criteria, that you couldn't meet that criteria, that you couldn't meet anyway, that you could get a variance based on that criteria.
Follow? And is that something that's doable, that's reasonable for a person who wasn't able to get it done in time? I mean, depending on the circumstances, it's not unattainable.
It's not unattainable. Of course, anybody can request a variance. It's not always that, it wouldn't necessarily be a given that staff would recommend approval of variance, and it's not a given that the planning commission would grant the variance. But you could always ask for it, and we would talk through that with the applicant. And it does take some time. It goes through a process that a staff report is written, so it's a month or two process, and then it goes to planning commission. Planning commission makes that determination whether they've met the criteria of the variance based on the staff report.
I'm assuming there's a cost to apply for a variance, do you know what?
Yeah, you're gonna ask me the cost. I'm guessing about $500.
I have a question. I'm wondering why with this analysis you assumed that the state of emergency will end earlier than 4 years after the Alberta fire.
That's mostly to show the difference between policies. You know, really what we're trying to, maybe a better name of it is a very short term duration, you know, assuming more a year or less than a year duration versus a predetermined set time of more than that time. You know, the definition of the emergency declaration can change over time. We will face at some point some potential challenges to say, really, how is town actually still in a state of emergency to justify being in this emergency? We're just taking that into account as we move to different phases.
So, do you think we will be pressed to answer those questions by September of 2021?
You know, I don't want to make that call. I can't imagine, you know, folks wanting to not support townspeople efforts. In terms of September 2024 specifically as the date, I can't make a judgment call on that one.
Any other questions? Okay. Do you have more information to go?
You know, open it up for questions, discussions, and then,
And we have 3 speaker request forms once council is finished with their questions. Councilor Cardamone? Jordan, did you include the 4 years in this just based on the fact that Jackson County uses that number?
yeah, I meant that as an example, rather than specific.
Okay. Councilor Clark?
Yeah, as I look through this, I find myself leaning towards option 2. Option 1 kind of lacks a level of predictability, and any number of things could determine the duration of an emergency order, and option 3, it kind of it kind of renders the zoning process, or it seems to weaken it, too much for my taste. That that a non-conforming use is sort of or structure. The allowability of a non-conforming structure is sort of ordained in perpetuity. That sort of weakens the spirit and the direction of why the zoning is established in the first place. And so I find myself leaning towards option 2 because it seems to recognize that following a disaster is a state of exception with it's a special circumstance to allow, or you would want to allow flexibility, but that at some point that state of exception is over, and the typical zoning and other assorted development requirements are should be in full effect again as they are written at some point.
Councilor Lima?
Do you want us to do our deliberation now, or do hear from the public first?
What would you recommend, Councilor?
All respects, might be very comment. I'd like to hear from the public.
I'm just still learning the process here. So we have 3 speaker request forms, and as I call your name, please step up to the dais and state your full name and city of residence for the record. We will do 3 minutes per speaker, and I have a timer. Karen Larson, please step up. Karen Larson. And state your full name and city of residence for the record.
Karen Larson, 114 Autumn Ridge in Palantir. First, I want to thank Dave and Jordan and Kristen. Some of us from our community met with them. They were very receptive to listening to us, responding to us right away when I had another question. And I just wanted to say thank you for that. We really appreciated that. So I've been taking notes while I was listening to all of this, so I'm not really as ready for this as I thought I was going to be. I guess the main thing is it possible to get copies of this, Jordan? Okay, great. So I would really encourage either option 2 or option 3. And I'm just thinking about some of our neighbors. I personally did not lose my home. Very thankful for that, but many, many of our neighbors did. And there's a few that are still in the process of rebuilding for whatever reason, building costs, so forth. So given more time is very important. Our neighborhood is having a hard time getting our head around the ordinance that was passed in 2019. I know we all got letters on it, but at that time we didn't have any empty lots in our neighborhood. So, you read it and you think, well, this doesn't apply to me, and you toss it, and suddenly it applies to us. So we're still trying to get our head around the idea that we have invested in our home ownership of single-family homes in a neighborhood of 47 lots, I think it is. And now next to us might be a fourplex. And what does that do as far as the value of our home? So we're needing some time just to understand that. And the ones that are still needing to rebuild definitely need time to try to rebuild what we want to do. So I guess that would be my main thing here, to get a copy of that. And just to put my 2 cents worth in on the options that I feel are best for our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Trevor Perry, please step on up and state your name and city of residence for the record. And we'll do a 3-minute timer.
Trevor Richard Perry, Phoenix, Oregon, 461 Elm Street. Hello, good evening. My name is Trevor Perry, and I'm here with my girlfriend, Gracie Solis. We are the owners of 156 Autumn Ridge Court. First off, I'd like to thank the council and residents of Talent for making this a wonderful place to call home. Grown up here, went to Ashland High School, and my girlfriend has been visiting the valley since she was a young child and has lived here since 2015. In 2021, we purchased our lot in the Autumn Ridge subdivision with hopes of building a single-family home. In this home, we would raise a family and be proud to call ourselves Talent residents. If we had to build a multi-family dwelling, this would encourage us to sell the lot and abandon our dreams of owning our first home. In regards to rebuilding, planning, and zoning, there are only a few undeveloped lots left in the Autumn Ridge subdivision, including ours and our bordering neighbor. We hope the council will act in good faith, representing and acknowledging the concerns and voices of the Autumn Ridge neighborhood. Gracie and I are against multifamily dwellings in the subdivision, and we would like the emergency declaration to continue, or we'd also be in favor for probably option 2 or option 3. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right. Next speaker request from Darby Affairs Club. Please step up and state your name and city residence for the record.
Thank you, Darby Earth Flood, City of Talent. I'm before you tonight as a property owner who lost a very precious home to my family on Rapp Road. While I wasn't a resident at the time, I did raise my children there, and I hold dear that property. But when the fire came and burned that what was a single-family dwelling with an ADU, I felt pretty strongly that I wanted to be part of the housing crisis solution and building a multi-family housing project there. I have the largest lot in my neighborhood that had single-family homes on it, and on that property I'm able to, with counting in setbacks and squeezing in some parking, I could get 4 units on that property. So pretty excited that I was going to be able to do that until I got the price tag. And once I saw how much my insurance provided me compared to how much it was going to cost because of the rising cost of building and other factors, I went from I was facing a $1.2 million project because of the rising costs of building, and I'm a family of pretty humble financial means, and that just wasn't an option at the time. But I still hold out hope. Is that my 3 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I still hold out hope. And this has been an evolving, changing situation. And one of the things I want to point out is that in option 3, you have 2 green check marks there, 2 green X's. And the one red is in this option will likely develop mostly single-family homes with a smaller proportion of multifamily homes. And what I'd like to speak on is that when the densities, rules of the densities were changed, if you were in high density before and you were high density after the changes, the only thing that changed were the minimum density, and there was one other item that we talked about earlier, but I can't remember what it was.
30 seconds.
What?
30 seconds.
Yeah. So the point I want to make is when those changes were made, when the densities were changed to get more density out of the high density area, housing studies were done, and it was determined that based on what was in place at the time, if we changed the densities, we could achieve certain benchmarks. Letting people build their homes the way they were won't change that. And so I still think that we would have a net zero situation at minimum if we didn't change the densities. Thank you for letting me go over time a little bit. I just feel like we could turn that red line into a yellow X with option number 3.
Thank you. All right. Final speaker request form, Dana Tesla. Please step back in and state your name and city residence for the record. We will have 3 minutes on the
Thank you, Council. My name is Dane Tesler. I live at 157 Autumn Ridge Court. So my fiance and I are transplants from the East Coast, but we've been in town for 4 years and just recently bought property a few months ago in that area. And we love town, it's a wonderful area, and it's somewhere that we feel that we want to sell roots and invest in and just love the community. I know that just generally having kind of gone through this disaster, I've been through a few other disasters similar in the East Coast, the hurricanes. I know rebuilding can be kind of difficult, and certainly people need property, but my contention is option 2, option 3 are where my preferences lie. The lot that we have is next to an empty lot that is under consideration for multi-development housing. The lot across the street from us also in consideration for multi-development family housing. I think having people have a choice to rebuild single-family units, at least give them a little bit longer time, because it takes time. It's not just as simple as a year or two to try to rebuild. I think having people, giving them extra time to make that consideration is important. And so my opinion, or at least my voice, would be for 2 or 3, and not immediately put up multi-family dwellings. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final members of the public who would like to fill out a speaker request form and step up and speak? Okay. Council. Councilor Wright.
I just want to confirm that if there was a timeline set, it wouldn't be the actual building that would need to be finished, right? It's just the permitting. And how long is that process taking right now? Like, is there any backlog still, or is that?
Yeah, so the way it works for us is when you submit your application for a permit, we will apply the regulations that are in place at the time of your submittal of the application. So whatever process in place at that time is what we'll apply with. Our turnaround right now in our planning department is very fast. We have prioritized rebuilds and it's a quick turnaround, so we haven't had any issues of difference in regulations due to time.
Any other questions? Or? Yes, Dave.
Could I just add a little bit of clarification? I simplified a little bit my earlier discussion about these options, and I just want to make it clear to you all that there are lots of different sort of conditions that can be added or not added. For instance, in Phoenix, where I said they had a one-year time limit, that's referring to commercial developments only, and to Alameda Fire. In Hillsborough, as I said, any kind of disaster could be not a neighborhood-wide or city-wide disaster. It could be your particular house is destroyed, but it requires 80% of the value of the house to be lost. And so there are various conditions that can be put on these. And as we, as staff gets together after this discussion and starts to hone in, you'll see some of those conditions being proposed, and you'll have a chance to say, yeah, we like that, or we think it needs to be more strict or whatever. But I'm just reminding you that this is a kind of a simplified view of the options necessarily. Otherwise, it gets so complex you can hardly even talk about it.
Just to comment on that, I would be, in general, to echo Councilor Clark's sentiments, I am also feeling most strongly about option 2, just because it seems most inclusive of the highest number of interested or impacted parties. And I would be really curious to see what the impacts of different timelines have been in communities in similar circumstances. And I would also love to know what the impact on the city would be choosing this option, and just so that we have a fuller picture. Councilor Pino.
I have a question before before I do the deliberation part, and forgive me if somebody already asked this. We're not looking at this in terms of commercial, really. We don't have that kind of like-for-like issue going on with commercial properties that we're worried about.
So we're not experiencing that like issue in the commercial like we are in our single family homes and high density living. We're recognizing that, you know, if disasters were to strike in the future, that we would likely benefit for having policy in place ahead of time. So I think the first thing we'll do is really nail down what we're doing specific to this situation. But what also, my recommendation would be to also consider other zones and other impacts particularly the commercial standpoint, just in case that need arises in the future.
Councilor O'Connor?
Yeah, I'll just weigh in. I kind of like option 2 for the reasons my colleague stated. I think that maybe the time period is a little short. I'm thinking 5 years sounds better to me. And I just, as part of my deliberation, I just want to keep in mind it's not preventing people from rebuilding or sitting on their land. It's just the ability to take advantage of the grandfather clause is really what that is. How long can you hold on to that grandfather clause? And I think it's reasonable to put a time limit on that. I think indefinite is we're kind of losing control of what zoning is designed to do, of our responsibility to provide land use guidance. That's kind of where I'm leaning, with probably looking around 5 years, but I understand this is not a decision, this is just more investigation. Thanks.
Councilor Ryder?
It does seem like option 2 would be very clear. I mean, we would be able to communicate, and that's an assumption, but I know you're usually very good with that. What that time frame is then versus like option 1 where it's really kind of uncertain and might not give as much notice. That's just my thought on option 2. Giving people a clear timeline.
Sorry, okay, no. Councilor Hastings?
Thanks. I'm also leaning to option 2, and I'd like to get, in particular, some more statistics about how long it really takes for insurances to assess and pay out. And also, it seems like there's been enough disasters going on around the country, even just here in the West, to get some averages on, how long is it typically taking to rebuild 50, 75%, so we can get some sort of sense of when, as you said, that the rebuilding's going pretty fast here in town compared to a lot of other places, so I don't want to use this particular experience as sort of our benchmark for that. But I do think option 2 seems the most reasonable balance between helping the property owner recover whether they decide to sell and want to get the best price they can, or to rebuild the way they want, balance with our goals to try to increase our housing stock and get some more affordable housing. So that's where I'm at. Thanks.
Councilor O'Connor?
Thank you. I like option 2. And I know we don't have to decide on a time frame tonight. I think that in the future, I'd like to see something longer than 4 years. I just wouldn't want anyone to be penalized for not being able to afford to rebuild in a quick time frame. So that's my only hesitation about option 2, is just that I want to make sure that it is a long enough time frame. But since we don't have to make that decision tonight, I think option 2 sounds best.
Any final
Do you have all the direction you need, Jordan?
I do thank you, and just to share with you all what our next steps will be, is we'll start looking at other examples and gathering information around, insurance limits or other disasters, experience remedial rates, etc., so that we can bring you all ideas around specific to the timeline, figure out what's the best case scenario for town. And we'll also begin looking at different applications for different zones. For example, commercial versus residential, or our focus will be on resolving residential issues fast issue we face right now is much more time sensitive. Our goal is to eventually get this in ordinance language for you as council to consider and for us to put a public hearing on for community input as the ultimate tool for getting this to be a part of our code. So thank you very much for being here tonight.
Moving on to the next agenda item, and I would like to invite in.
Thank you, Council President. Very well done. Next item on the agenda is commission and committee reports. Are there any commission or committee reports? Council Byers?
I have two big pieces of news. First, we, on the Parks Commission, lost our fantastic chair, Donna Ruby. She stayed on the commission, but she's stepping down to be replaced by, who I think will be an equally fantastic chair, Charlie Cross. So we're really grateful to Donna for everything she's done so far on the Parks Commission, and we're really excited that she stayed. And I also think we're going to see a lot of good work happen under Charlie's leadership, especially because he has a co-chair with, oh my gosh, it's a long day, co-chair with Mr. Cooper. So we're excited about that. And then also I wanted to do a shout out to the Public Works. We have a new park that is almost completed in the Prince Pathway Park, and it's unusual for something to happen in this time frame, and Public Works suggested because of the way the park was installed, it hasn't been accessible yet, so this could be a great opportunity for an actual parks opening with the ribbon cutting ceremony as soon as everything is finalized and embraced. And I know the Parks Commission is super excited to have a celebratory moment like that. More space for kids to play and enjoy that. That's pretty exciting.
That is exciting. Thanks to Public Works for really doing a great job on that part from the beginning. Yeah. Councilor Perry,
Thank you. I actually have a question. Where is that park? Is it Old Bridge Village area? It is in Old Bridge Village area. Great. I'll have to go check it out. So I'm the liaison to TPAC, as you all know. And one of the reasons that Chair Ruiz had to step off of Parks is because she has been working with our committee on an awesome planning document so that the Town Public Works Committee can have a larger, longer frame sort of master plan. It probably won't be as in-depth as the Parks Master Plan, but Donna and our committee are working on that. We had a meeting with the mayor. She gave us some great tips about how to make it comprehensive and helpful. So that is what TPAC is working on right now. It's very exciting.
it is very exciting. Give staff something to work off of in the future. Donna has done some really great work for the city. Anybody else? Oh, it's 8 o'clock, time for a break. We'll just go ahead and finish this, and I'll put it to the council if they want to take a break. Councilor Clark?
Yeah, the Urban Forestry Committee has been working to prepare for the symposium on Friday, and I believe all members of that committee are going to be present and volunteering and tabling out front and informing local residents about grant opportunities to beautify their properties and plant trees. Additionally, the committee is working on plans for where we can plant trees during the rest of this winter and spring, and discussing options for Arbor Day and other events.
Councilor Donovan?
Yeah, I have a question for Councilor Clark. It's very exciting about Friday. I know folks are, it's suggested that they register by emailing Mike Oxenden at the city, as it says on the city website, but I have been asked if people show up at the door, will you let them in?
I have not heard that it was full yet, so
We'll let them in.
yeah, that was my,
Anybody else? Yeah, I just want to mention that I attended the Jackson County Long-Term Recovery Groups. I always get this backwards. Is it Reimagine Road or Road Reimagine? I always get it backwards. It's one of those. Road Reimagine, okay. So their last meeting was last week, and they're still working hard to get, they have a goal of getting 1,000 surveys filled out. Those surveys really just ask questions about your residency and you know, some likes and not likes of potential rebuild. That process is still going on, and it's still their big push. So that pretty much dominated the whole conversation. I have to say, I'm really enjoying those meetings. I think they're doing very good work, and I hope everybody who's gotten a link to Reimagine Road, somebody just said, see, this is the problem I'm having. Yeah, Road Reimagine, I think it's long code or something. And anybody who's gotten a link to please take the survey. They're still pushing for 1,000 surveys. That link can be found on the Jackson County Long-Term Recovery Facebook page and on their website. That's about it. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to the next item. It's other business or future agenda items. Any other business or future agenda items? All right. There are 3 written communications on the record, and if there's no other questions or comments about that, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. We don't need to take a break. I think we can skip the whole break thing. This meeting is adjourned at 8:03. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, staff. Thank you, President.